There is no place like home. There is no place like home.
Thank you for joining us in our first annual Juneteenth Heritage Jubilee. I'm Tish Winston, co-chair of the Juneteenth Heritage Jubilee Committee.
And I'm Amani Smith, chair of the Bastrop Juneteenth Heritage Jubilee Committee.
In this video, we'll share with you the history of Juneteenth and how we celebrate in Bastrop, Texas.
In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln set all slaves free in the United States. However, the word of freedom did not travel to Texas until June 19, 1865, which is the reason why we celebrate the 19th of June today.
June 19th is the oldest known celebration commemorating the ending of slavery in the United States.
And at this time, here are some personal stories from local residents.
My name is Elroy Williams, and I was born on the Trigg Ranch in the Hills Prairie area. I attended Clearview School for about a year, and then because it was so far to walk to school, my dad brought me into town, and I would attend the school here in Bastrop. But in the area, every 19th of June, the people would gather around at that old school there, Clearview School, and they would barbecue meat, and they would eat and enjoy, and they would play ball, and they'd have races. And some of the men ran against some of the older men. And there was a fella, a little short fella named Jim Fuller. And he could outrun any of those men. He was a little short guy, but he could really run. It was always a festive occasion to have the 19th of June, and they would have speakers. Sometimes they would have dances, and somebody would play the fiddle, and they'd tap dance upon the trailer. And they do various things to interest the people who would say that. And they would have food, pies, and cakes more than anyone could eat. And so we always look forward to the 19th of June. But between the blacks and the white, the 19th of June was always peaceful. They would provide everything that you needed for that picnic.
My parents always said the 4th of July was for the white, and the 19th of June was for the black. That's what I was taught. And we didn't celebrate the 4th of July. And they said, well, we were free. And they loved it. And we would drink Kool-Aid and Polly Pop all day long. They would barbecue all night. And we just had a good time celebrating. Played ball and have church. Stop having church, go back and eat. It's just an all-day event. And we're celebrating our freedom. And we just had a good time.
I'm Ken Kesselis, and I'm here primarily as a historian in Bastrop. Sophie a minute ago mentioned the fact that African Americans of her generation were taught not to celebrate the 4th of July because they had the Juneteenth celebration. The reverse was true for me growing up in a segregated Bastrop, because the white kids grew up considering the Juneteenth celebration as an African American celebration, and it wasn't something that we should participate in. So I've had to learn in the last few years from Tish and Doc Jackson and others that it needs to be an entire community celebration. My historical perspective on this subject, of course, begins with an understanding that in 1865, June 19th, in Galveston, Texas, U.S. Army General Granger came with a force of soldiers intent to, by force of arms, require the Emancipation Proclamation freeing the slaves to become effective in Texas. It took a while. There was some slave owners that tried not to free their slaves, but with the soldiers here, for the most part, in a few months, that was accomplished. And so that day, June 19th, obviously is etched in the hearts and souls of all African Americans.
Okay. When I was a kid and it came time for Juneteenth, then we could always tell when it was time, because our mamas was going to be getting ready. They was going to be cooking. They was going to be gathering up, you know, like sisters and brothers would come together and they were going to plan. And all the time that I lived in Cedar Creek, the big thing for Juneteenth was at Alum Creek at the D-Shades, Mount Pleasant, Cedar Creek's church. So that's why everybody went for the big picnic. So everybody cooked their little food, gathered it all up, put it in their cars, and we went to Alum Creek for that day, for the Juneteenth. That Saturday, it was always on a Saturday. So that's how we learned to, that I grew up to know about Juneteenth. They always had them big cakes, cobblers, barbecue, Kool-Aid, we can't forget that, Polypop they were calling it then, yeah. Watermelons, cantaloupes, I mean, you could name it, it was there, they claimed it. So it wasn't nothing, you know, certain folks could come to, everybody. I mean, this was a community combined thing, from Shiloh to Cedar Creek, Hills Prayer, Watterson Prayer, Bastrop, even if the people wanted to come from town to come over there, to come out to the country, it was fine. But the country was going to be jumping on Juneteenth. That's simple as it could be. Simple as I could put it. We were I say about the 12th person in line of the parade one Saturday on Juneteenth. And the drill team was in line. We were already lined up at the school at the the West Campus. That's where we had to come from, the West Campus downtown. So we were lined up there. We had already won the trophy for first place. So about halfway, I say just a little bit past Tracy's, the van that was carrying our music quit. So guess what we had to do? We had to push that van all the way down through Main Street here till we got to the end. It was Citizen State Bank then, till we got to Citizen State Bank. And when we got there, then we let the van, we couldn't push it no further. But everybody, all the men from on the street was coming on after they saw me and my sister and my nephew pushing the van, because that's what the music was in. You know, we had to, and we done won first place, so you know we got to go down through that. So we got on up in that van, and then we had told them kids, don't y'all stop dancing, just keep going, keep going, keep going. And then we pushed that van all the way down till we got to the end of the street, and then we cut it off. But the men that's one thing I can say, the men of Bastrop, when they saw us pushing that van, they all ran out from the street and pushed that van on down through here. So that's how we made it. But we got first place that day.
For pushing the van?
No, not for pushing the van, but for our little drill team. So, but we had to push that van on down through it. We couldn't say the van had quit. We didn't want to do that. And then have to forfeit our little first place. So we pushed that van all the way down through here. That's the most exciting part of Juneteenth that I can remember.
I'm David Locke. I'm at Locke Drugs here in Bastrop, Texas. I was born in 1942, so that makes me an old timer. And I'm going to talk some about Juneteenth as a perspective of old timer, and also as my term as mayor here in Bastrop. I remember when I was a kid, and nobody seems sure when this was or when it ended or when it started, when there was parades here in Bastrop. But I do remember coming to some Juneteenth parades when I was a small child here. Had to be the late 40s or maybe early 50s, but it ended sometime in the 50s. I don't know when and or why, but I do remember some of those parades because we'd come to them. It seemed like it always rained on Juneteenth. You'd always expect to rain on Juneteenth. And also in Hills Prairie, I was raised up in Hills Prairie, the community out there, and my grandpa was a farmer and rancher at Hills Prairie, and he would always furnish a steer or some kind of meat for the Juneteenth celebrations out there, and it was always a big deal at Hills Prairie. It was, I remember some of the families out there was like Shack Beals family, the Tom Davis family, the Williams family, the Clemenses, the Whites, Joe White, Cordell White, and their families. There's always a big celebration out there. And here in Bastrop, there's the parades and other celebrations. Also, when it ended, I do remember in 1965, they had one parade that was brought back to parades in 1965. They had one parade commemorating the anniversary, 100th year anniversary of the end of the Civil War. and we were up here on the town watching the parades in the afternoon. And what struck me as really interesting is a lot of the floats represented some of the old plantations, like the Moore plantation, the McGee plantations, out at Hills Prairie in this area. Now, if anyone has any kind of information, historical information about Juneteenth, about the history, some information that we don't have, but photographs, any kind of things that we could make copies of, would you please bring them by here. We'll take good care of them and give them back to you. We'll make some copies and just bring them here, and we'll see that they're getting they get to the right people and give some more historical background. There's a lot of history missing about Juneteenth, and we need to fill in some of these gaps of dates and people who are instrumental in Juneteenth. So please bring them by here at Lock Oak, and I'll give them to the people that need to have them.
Thank you for joining us today.
We've been celebrating for 147 years. And here's to another 147 years.
There